Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
We can hear you.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me? I was having some technical trouble with my computer.
We can hear you. Hi, this is the recording secretary. We have someone on the attendee list, Brian Lisa, if that's board member user. If you could rename your Zoom, and then we can go ahead and let you in. Hi, this is the recording secretary. I just need to verify whether Zoom user Brian Lisa is a board member that we're waiting for. If you can, I'm going to unmute you so you can confirm. Okay, we will go ahead and put you back in the attendee list until we get confirmation. Okay, so board chairs, we're missing a couple of board members, but we have a quorum. We have a quorum of each board if you guys would like to go ahead and start the meeting.
Hi there, Pat. Hey there, Patty, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, let's get started. And then I guess just jump in and interrupt if other commissioners, board members have joined us. Does that sound okay, Patty?
That sounds like a good plan.
Okay.
Can you hear me, Patty, as well?
I can hear you, Vice Chair Hooker.
Yeah, real quickly, I see that Scott Kincaid, is he here? Is he on board with us? Or is that just a ledgering? He's not going to attend till tomorrow.
Chair Kincaid is here at this meeting.
Oh, great. All right. I give the floor to Chair Kincaid along with Edmondson then. Thanks.
Okay. All right, at this time, I'd like to call to order a joint meeting, special meeting of the Design Review Board and Cultural Heritage Board of the City of Santa Rosa. Want to make some statements of important notices regarding these joint meetings. Due to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Orders N-25-20 and N-29-20, which suspend certain requirements of the Brown Act and the order of the Health Officer of the County of Sonoma to shelter in place to minimize the spread of COVID-19. Board members will participate by teleconference into the joint meeting of August 19th, 2020. The live stream of this meeting will be uploaded to the City of Santa Rosa website as soon as possible after this meeting. If you emailed or called in public comment prior to the meeting, these comments will be summarized for comments into the record, but full emails will be archived as part of the record Today we have item 6.1, which is a report item. We will give an opportunity for public comments during that presentation, although it's not a public hearing. And we will also open up our general public comment time for all other comments that any member of the public wishes to make. All right. We will be conducting today's meeting in a virtual setting using Zoom. Board members and staff are participating from remote locations, practicing appropriate social distancing. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting as noted on the city's website and as noted on the agenda. With that, recording secretary, may we please have the roll call?
Let the record reflect that for Design Review Board, all board members are present except for board member Sharon. For Cultural Heritage Board, all board members are present except for board members Garrett and Vice Chair Fennell.
Okay, thank you very much. We will move on to the approval of the minutes, the draft special joint meeting minutes for our joint meeting on August 6th, 2020. I will open this up, all DRB and CHB members. Any comments, revisions, or suggestions for changes regarding the draft minutes? And please just take the floor if you do. Okay, and I'm not hearing anybody, so those minutes will stand as printed. Now we're going to move on to item number 3 on the agenda, board business. And Chair Kincaid, would you please read the DRB statement of purpose, or if there's no statement of purpose for this item, staff, please instruct me to read the CHB statement of purpose.
Thank you, Chair Edmondson. I'll go ahead and read the board business statement of purpose for the Design Review Board at this time. Design Review Board, per Zoning Code Chapter 20-52.030F, project review. The review authority shall consider the location, design, site plan configuration, and the overall effect of the proposed project upon surrounding properties and the city in general. Review shall be conducted by comparing the proposed project to the general plan, any applicable specific plan, applicable zoning code standards and requirements, consistency of the project within the city's design guidelines, architectural criteria for special areas, and other applicable city requirements, i.e. city policy statements and development plans. That's the purview of the Design Review Board. And handing it back to you, Chair Edmondson.
Thank you, Chair Kincaid. And Cultural Heritage Board statement of purpose. The Cultural Heritage Board shall consider the following matters, standards, guidelines, and criteria to the extent applicable in deciding whether to grant or deny a permit. Whether the proposed change is consistent or incompatible with the architectural period of the building, whether the proposed change is compatible with any adjacent or nearby landmark structures or preservation district structures, whether the colors, textures, materials, fenestration, decorative features, and details proposed are consistent with the period and or are compatible with adjacent structures, whether the proposed change destroys or adversely affects an important architectural feature or features, the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings, and such other matters, criteria, and standards as may be adopted by resolution of the Cultural Heritage Board. That concludes item 3, and we're going to move on to item 4, which is public comment. This is the time where any person may address matters not listed on the agenda, but which are within the subject matter of the boards and the jurisdiction. The public may comment on agenda items when the item is called, so we will afford an opportunity for any member of the public wishing to speak about the downtown plan under item 6.1 to make comments at that time. So this public comment opportunity is for other relevant statements, and each speaker will be allowed up to 3 minutes to speak, and a maximum of 3 minutes is the right way to put that. Recording Secretary, do we have any members of the public who appear to be wishing to comment at this time?
Chair Edmondson, right now we don't see any raised hands. Maybe we can just give another minute or so.
Okay. And just like to mention, any member of the public who's having difficulty using Zoom to enter the meeting and offer to make comment. There is a phone number as an alternative that is on, if I'm not mistaken, on the agenda. Yes, a toll-free number. So if you're having difficulty with that, please give us a call and we will do our best to work you into the meeting at a later time.
Okay, Chair Edmondson, I don't see any raised hands.
Okay, I'm going to close public comment. If any member of the public is attempting to call in or email right now, staff, please let me know at an appropriate time and we'll hear from everyone. Okay, let's move on to statements of abstention. Cultural Heritage Board members, do we have any abstentions tonight? Not hearing any. DRB members, any statements of abstention tonight?
Yes, this is Board Member Kortenbrock. I have to abstain from tonight's meeting due to ownership of parcels within the plan area.
Okay, thank you very much. And
thank you.
Staff, are there board member report? Excuse me, are there department reports that would be relevant to share at this time to sort of reorder the agenda, or for an abstention, could abstaining board members leave at this time? Just to get clarity on that.
Chair Edmondson, this is Bill Rose. I'll speak on behalf of, with regard to the DRB. I don't have any department reports. I'll turn it over to Susie if she has anything she'd like to add.
I am in the same position. I have nothing to add.
Okay, and as I understand it, the staff might want to comment a little bit on its progress and intentions with regard to some process improvements for DRB-CHB joint meetings. Is that something that we should cover at this time before abstaining board members leave and we introduce item 6.1, or does staff think that can be handled in another way?
I think that will be included as part of item 6.1.
Okay, so abstaining board members can perhaps view that discussion in the live stream that gets posted and then submit feedback to staff either at their next meeting or via some sort of comment.
My understanding is if they're abstaining, that they can comment, but as a resident, member of the public, and not a board member.
Right, okay. Regarding just the informal discussion that I understand staff wants to have regarding, long-term general process improvements. Just want to make sure staff doesn't want to have that with all the board members present.
No, that will be part of tonight's presentation.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Any
Chair, then I have a question also.
Yeah, please, board member Muser.
I apologize. I need to know, I guess, if owning property within the area that we're discussing tonight is a reason to abstain tonight, then I would also need to abstain tonight.
Do we have a representative of the city attorney's office? Although this is a determination that each board member makes for him or herself, but.
Chair, this is Board Member DeBacher. A question for staff. Since we're not actually making any decisions or approving anything tonight, is there actually a reason to abstain from anything? This is primarily informational for the board members. Is that correct, or is there more happening tonight other than an informal training for us?
I guess that was my thought as well.
We just did have an abstention on the same basis, but that's not binding on you, board member Muser, but I'd invite comment from staff in response to those comments, please.
This is Bill Rose again. We do not have a city attorney staff representing us tonight, so I am trying to track that down. So if you give me a moment, I can see if I can get that information.
Okay, great.
Chair Edmondson, this is Bill Rose again. If we could take a 5-minute recess, I'm very sorry. I'd like to make sure we can confirm direction from the city attorney's office, and I'll need to make contact for that.
Okay, let's take a tight 5-minute break. Staff, please break in at 5 minutes, or either to let me know that we need more time and to inform the public, or to let me know we can come back.
Okay, Chair Edmondson, we are ready to reconvene.
Okay. Staff, can you hear me? See me?
Yes, we can see you and hear you loud and clear.
Okay, we're going to call the meeting back to order. Staff, do you have any response to Board Member Muser's request?
Yes, I do. We were able to contact the City Attorney's Office and we got some direction. Essentially, if a board member owns property within the boundary of the plan area, that would be considered a financial interest. That board member would need to abstain and clearly state the reason for abstaining.
Okay, Board Member Muser, is that a sufficient answer for guidance? And do you have a statement of abstention to make?
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm sorry for the delay. I do own property at 545 Humboldt Street, so I will need to abstain tonight.
Okay, I assume there are no further statements of abstention, so let's move on to item 6.1, which is a report item regarding downtown station area specific plan. I mentioned earlier that I will afford an opportunity for public comment during this item. And let's move right to the staff presentation. And Ms. Lyle, if you're ready, please start the staff presentation.
Chair Edmondson, I have a quick question.
Yeah, Board Member Weigel, please.
And it's probably for staff. So DRB appears to have a quorum, but now CHB does not. Does that impact the report?
This is Bill Rose again. I was counting members, 1, 2, 3. We do have 4 members on the CHB.
Oh, we do. I missed somebody. So never mind. We're good.
So we're good to go. Thank you for the double check.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Ms. Lyle, whenever you're ready, please.
Yes, thank you so much. Let me share the presentation real quick and then we'll get started. All right, can everyone see the presentation okay?
Yes.
Great. All right, good evening. Your long anticipated presentation tonight. My name is Amy Lyle. I'm the supervising planner with the advanced team here at the city. I don't think I've actually met you all in person, so I'm really happy to be here tonight and to give you this overview of the downtown station area specific plan. So with that, I am going to start with just a little bit of background and we'll set up the objectives for tonight. But first, we've been working on this plan for a little over a year now. And it really started with a deep dive on the issues and opportunities based on our existing 2007 specific plan and some of the issues that we've seen in implementing that. And there was a lot of community outreach done, and there were alternatives that were posed to the public, and there was a lot of great feedback and robust outreach, and all of that was incorporated into what we now have as the draft plan. So tonight's presentation will be on the plan itself. There is also an environmental impact report. So both of these documents are posted online and are out for public comment through August 31st. So if your boards do have comments on the environmental impact report, we do ask that you provide those in writing, and you can email those to me. And then we'll make sure that all of those comments are actually responded to as part of the final environmental impact report. But as far as the rest of the process, tonight is informational, but we will be coming back to your boards in September. And then we will be going to the Planning Commission for their final review and recommendation in September. And then we hope to go to the City Council in October. And then the plan would actually be effective in November. So tonight, our objectives are to provide an overview of the plan, and it's really high level, so I'm just going to go through each of the chapters, but I am going to highlight certain areas where we do want your attention based on your expertise and role in looking at downtown development, and then also just receive feedback. So if you have feedback to provide, you can do that during this meeting. You can also do it in writing afterwards, but we would like to have some discussion and be able to answer questions as they come up. And with that, we are still asking for public input as well. For the month of August, we've been doing a lot of outreach to individual neighborhood groups, business communities, property owners. We will be doing a meeting in Spanish a little bit later at the last week of August. So we're really trying to get as much input as we can. We really want to know what we got right, what we got wrong, what is it missing, both from residents and from the development community, because we know this plan is really important to a lot of folks, and we want to get this right. So just a little more background here. So the planning area itself covers roughly 720 acres. And it does include a number of residential neighborhoods along with the core of the courthouse square and then the railroad square smart station area. And then it's a story that most people know as far as what happened with our 2007 downtown station area plan and specific plan. And really that plan envisioned a tremendous amount of development that never transpired. And part of those reasons is because the plan itself did not really include the functional regulatory mechanics to allow that development to occur. So part of the role of this update is to look at those barriers to development and to remove them and to provide clear direction on design and multimodal opportunities and to just create this vibrancy that we need for downtown. So as part of the tenets of our policy work, we did check in with the community and found that the 6 key goals are still true. So these are the same 6 goals that were part of the 2007 plan. And those really include to create more jobs, more housing downtown, really create a diverse mix of uses, but still protecting that historic character and really creating a cultural and art center. So as far as the community engagement, this planning effort has really been a model for us here at the city. We were and have been able to get into more underrepresented groups. We've been doing more translation than in the past. We've had an incredible community advisory committee that have been really integral to our success and being able to liaison with certain other sectors of the community and help us with press and outreach. And then we had a very large technical advisory committee, which is made up of surrounding cities and county and agencies such as SMART and Public Works and some of the more technical areas of the team. So all of that kind of allowed us to really dive in and be able to create this draft document that's before you today. So let's get into what is in this document. It is broken up into 6 chapters. There's really a goal to make this very visually pleasing, very simple to understand, and concise. And this is the vision statement that's very similar to the 6 key goals. And really one of the things that we've looked to as far as when we're creating policy. I would also note that in the introduction section of the plan, there is quite a bit of information on vision, and Andrew Triple did a great job of writing some guiding principles. So I would love you all to take a look at that and let us know if we got that right, because I think those guiding principles will be really important when we move into conversations about design and the aesthetics that your boards will be overseeing. All right, we're going to start with land use tonight. So this chapter covers existing land use, what development potential could potentially occur. It does propose new land use designations. So there are 4 new designations and corresponding zoning districts that are proposed. This chapter also looks at economic vitality. So you'll see a lot of our existing recovery efforts within this section, but also looking forward to our next recovery for COVID. It talks a lot about art and culture and the walkable development pattern that we're striving to have. And it really has some other key moves and strategies around a move to floor area ratio and looking at ways that we can activate ground floor uses in a different way than we are right now. So this is just a little snippet of the land use map. So part of the goals of the plan is to identify where the most intense development would occur. So the plan does show opportunity areas. And so these 8 opportunity areas are really based on some vacant properties. There's only about 3% of the plan area that's vacant, more underutilized properties. So these red polygons are really where the greatest change would occur as proposed under the plan. And really looking at preserving the residential and those historic preservation districts that already exist there. So this map shows the land use categories and those 4 new land uses that are proposed. So among those, there's the urban core, which is that dark red. And that really includes what we hope to be the most intensity, the tallest buildings for the planned area. And then there's the station area, which is very similar to the zoning that's there now, but it would allow for more visitor serving uses and around the smart station, and then housing around that transit as well. And then the maker mixed use, which is predominantly up in the Maxwell Court area. And that would be light industrial that's envisioned to include live work options and create more of a village feel in those areas. And then the neighborhood mixed use would be more neighborhood oriented uses with pockets of supportive retail. And then we have parks. And so the symbology related to parks are approximate. They are not specific to any parcels. Courthouse Square is obviously already there, but as far as the other symbology, it's very general, and it is related to what we heard from the outreach efforts on where we need to actually create more open space. So the biggest key move for this chapter is the move to floor area ratio. So it is proposed that we do get rid of height and density requirements within those key opportunity areas and move to a floor area ratio. So this would provide extra flexibility and really simplify the regulations. And we've seen these tools used in other downtowns, very vibrant downtowns. And so we did want to propose this in the hopes that it would be successful here. And we have heard so far very positive things about this move to FAR. And another component of our land use chapter is looking at affordability and homelessness. We do have a variety of efforts already underway and a lot of policy already adopted related to these 2 things. But this is going a little bit further because we want to create incentives for units that may be smaller or affordable by design. As I noted, the maker mixed use, having that live work creative option. And then also we want to be able to encourage larger units. So three bedrooms plus for families. We really want an extreme amount of opportunity at all levels of income and sizes to be downtown, near transit, near jobs. All right, and I'm gonna go through the presentation pretty quickly and then take questions at the end. So let me know though if folks do want to stop at any time. So I'm just going to move on to mobility. And so this chapter really focuses on the circulation network and with a really large view on multimodal opportunities and really looking at how all types of transportation can utilize the street network. And some of the key moves here relate to the east-west connections for the planned area, looking at that for transit and more passive opportunities, and then also parking itself. And the multimodal opportunities for bike and pedestrian improvements really builds on our 2018 bike and pedestrian master plan. There are a few tiny changes for consistency that will need to occur to our bike and ped master plan. We will be presenting this tomorrow night to the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Board. But in total, the plan is looking to improve safety, to improve lighting in certain areas under the underpasses, for instance, and also looking at safety along the Prince Memorial Greenway, trying to create more activity that would front the creek, more eyes on the creek, things of that sort. And as far as the east-west connections, the plan really looks at that in a couple different ways. One is through a transit connection. So looking at that smart station and the transit mall, and then creating a circulator or a loop throughout the planning area. And then also looking at a connection through the mall for pedestrians. So it would be, it could be more robust depending on how we work with the Simon Mall, but it could be as small as wayfinding and additional lighting and extending hours as well. So that is not fleshed out in great detail, but the concept is approached within this draft plan. So one of the other key moves of our plan is the elimination of parking. So the entire plan area, all 720 acres, it is proposed to remove parking requirements. And this is one of those key areas we really want you to review and give us feedback on, because this does include some of those historic neighborhoods, some of those areas where we have really tight and narrow streets. And we know parking can be an issue, but the vision of this plan over the next 20 years is to transform into a vibrant downtown where there is access to transit, easy access to get to the train itself, and less of a reliance on the single occupancy automobile. But we aren't there yet, and we know right now there is quite a reliance on the automobile. So we do want to hear if there's ways that we can make the elimination of parking easy on populations where we know it may be difficult. And we do expect parking to be developed as residential development occurs. We just are increasing the flexibility so that developers can propose what they feel is appropriate for their use and their location. So it would just remove the minimum requirements, but we still expect to be reviewing parking as part of projects. So moving into urban design, this is really one of those key chapters where a lot of key moves are being made, and we do want your attention on this chapter of all of it. And this chapter does look at the park system and looking at creating more of a civic space opportunity. It does include an update to our design standards and our design guidelines. So a lot of that is around how we activate those ground floors and how do we deal with that transition between the historic neighborhoods and what we hope to be this really dense, tall downtown in those opportunity zones. And as part of this, we also want to hear your comments, because we're under careful consideration is a change in process as well. So we are working on drafting and revising our guidelines and our standards now that we have this draft plan on the street. And we are changing only those things that need to be done consistent with this plan. So we aren't looking at overhauling any of the design guidelines or, for instance, neighborhood preservation. The only changes that we're hoping to make is really just consistent with this plan. But that full package will be coming to you mid-September. And as part of that, under consideration is a change in process. So we want to include and continue to include a process to allow for design review, but potentially simplify it. We also want to look at the process for landmark alterations, but we also want to retain the opportunity for both boards to weigh in. So we want to hear what's working for you, what's not, and if you have ideas on that process as you review projects under this plan. So with that, we'll move into some of the nuts and bolts. So first is the active ground floor. I can pull up the plan itself when we get into questions, but this is just a little snippet of some of the symbology that's included. And so the plan does identify certain areas of the downtown where we want active ground floors. And this really gives greater flexibility. So we're not looking at only retail on the ground floor or a certain use, but looks at more of the design. So it provides some different options to be able to activate those ground floors. And there's a couple little other areas of focus. One is that transition area. So one thing we really grappled with is what happens when you have a one-story bungalow on one side of the street and a potential 20-story building on the other. And so we've looked at some of the other jurisdictions that have grappled with this. And so we want to make sure that we've identified the right parts of the planned area where that relationship could occur. And we want to add additional design elements. And then we also want to look at what's actually required in these transition areas. So there's two sets. There's one for the downtown transition and then one for the station transition. So let me get to the actual policy language. So the transition zones they include a couple of different aspects. One is the setback from the street. Another is how many stories developers can go up and before they have to provide an additional setback. And the other is a daylight plane. So really allowing a step back to be able to have that visual relief from the mass of a large building. So this is very draft. We really want feedback. We have been hearing from a lot of the residential community, but this is an area where we would love you all to focus and provide some comments to see if this is really something we got right, or if we needed to add something more or less. And then, as I noted, parks and civic spaces. This plan really does rethink the way we look at civic spaces. And so we hope that through this draft that it provides flexibility so we can encourage more private open space, we can encourage rooftop gardens, parklets, and also a range of entertainment and activities to really activate the open spaces that we have in the planning area. And then finally, historic resources. One of the key issues and tenets in the plan is to protect our existing historic resources. And we know it has been a very long time since the downtown plan has completed a survey. And so we programmatically have in this plan designed a way for, at least in those opportunity areas, to do some survey work. So the opportunity areas are those highlighted in red in the lower map. And this map I can show in the plan as we get into questions if you'd like, in a little more detail. But this shows how many properties are age eligible as of 2019. And there's quite a few. And so for that reason, we really want to take a deeper dive into that, into those areas where we want to facilitate the most amount of development. And so we do have grant money online right now and are working on an RFP to do a survey for those opportunity areas so we can help identify which properties are historically significant and which are not. Right now, as projects come forward, they have to do their own individual historical survey. So this would hopefully streamline that process and then also allow for another conversation around policy and what should be protected. The effort does envision having an historical context statement created for the downtown as well. So that work is something also we would like your boards to look at and to focus on and provide some feedback. And the other thing I'll note is the map above, the magenta properties are what the plan considers to be catalyst sites. And so it's a collection of city-owned sites and private sites, but where there are either eminent interest or public-private partnership opportunities. But those sites did have specific surveys done as part of our environmental impact report to even further streamline, and with the hopes that those projects would be able to go first and provide those catalyst opportunities to spur more development downtown. So the next two chapters, I'll just go through very briefly. They do contain important information, but it's not the greatest area of focus that we want you to look at tonight. But the first is the public services and sustainability chapter. And this really looks at all of the environmental components. So natural hazards, noise, air quality, and then our public services, police and fire. And so we did work very closely with our public works department and our EIR subconsultants to identify the infrastructure improvements that would be necessary to realize the development that is envisioned under this plan. And then another piece that also relates to the streamlining opportunity is to look at air quality. We know that our highway system provides a lot of toxic air contaminants along with various stationary sources in the plan area. So this plan identifies those and puts out a mitigation program for properties who may be building within those areas. And it also talks about sensitive receptors and making sure that if they do locate in the areas, they have adequate air filtration. And then today of all days, this slide looks different to me, but also looking at hazards and emergency response and really bolstering the efforts that we already have in place in the city. And then financing and implementation. Because it is a specific plan, we do need to identify the funding mechanisms associated with the infrastructure that's proposed. And we do look at the phasing that goes along with this plan. It's a 20-year plan. Most specific plans have a shelf life of about 10 years because we do want a lot of this development to occur within the next decade. We are entering another recovery period, but we are hopeful that a lot of the development that we have heard of and hope to receive will still come through. So the plan does look at the phasing over the next 5 and 10 years and 15 years and hopes that those catalyst sites would be first, or that we have realized some of those public-private partnerships that we've mentioned in this presentation. And as far as financing, this really builds off of the 2007 plan and some of the funding mechanisms that are already present downtown, with the recognition of some new ones. For instance, the Federal Opportunity Zone declaration. So that opportunity for tax breaks is now there. And also the creation of the Renewal Enterprise District. So there are some new funding mechanisms in place. So that is really the overview of the draft plan. Where we go from here. So this plan is not just a specific plan, but the package will include, as I noted, a zoning ordinance, and that will include some changes to design guidelines as well. And those are only to be consistent with this specific plan. And then we also will be amending, making small amendments to the bike and pedestrian master plan and to the Santa Rosa Avenue corridor plan. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I can also pull up the plan itself if necessary. So I will end my slide share here and we can go back to that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lyle. I think that we're going to proceed with questions board by board, and I'm going to turn it over to Chair Kincaid to survey the DRB first for any questions you might have of staff.
Great, thank you, Chair Edmondson. I can see my board on the screen, so I suppose if you have questions for staff, why don't you just give me a little hand raise and I'll call you out. All right, Board Member Wagle, you're up first.
Yeah, I just had two questions on the plaza, the public plaza item. I guess it's in chapter 4 with regard to urban design. I'm curious about the kind of the restroom component, I think, or public washroom component. It looks like public washrooms were only included for plazas over 25,000 square feet or civic spaces. And I would posit that maybe we want to look at including them for the public plaza option to encourage, events and things like that, as opposed to using porta potties all the time for those types of facilities. So that would be kind of my question, comment there. And then my second one is a question on the catalyst sites. I think the CHB might be concerned with this too, but I'm a little worried with like the library, the central library and City Hall as being catalyst sites, because they are historical and architecturally significant for our city. And I understand that they're city owned, and so that they're potentially easier to work a public-private partnership with, or because they're not encumbered by kind of private ownership, I guess. But I'm curious what was developed on those items in particular.
Yeah, the catalyst sites were chosen for a variety of different reasons, but I will say that there is a feasibility study underway to look at the redevelopment of the City Hall site. So this is really just recognizing that effort could take place. We don't really have a timeline. It's certainly not something that is imminent, but it is an opportunity. And so that is one of the city-owned sites that was identified as a potential catalyst site that we do want to remove barriers and streamline as much as possible in the case that there would be a potential project.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Wagle and staff for the answer to the question. Vice Chair Hedgepeth, you have a question?
Can you hear me now? Thank you. Yeah, a couple things. Great presentation. I'm trying to grapple in the next 20 years with the word maker, that there's this maker zone. And it seems like so much of our industry now, there are people that can do computer programming and do all kinds of cyber things and make revenue. Then there's the actual melting of steel or making of leather. And they both have their components as far as traffic. I'm wondering if it's a loose enough description that if people collected together as a collective, and the ground floor was something that perhaps had this, that the financeability of housing, because these sites certainly have the fertility of having large amounts of housing, which is needed. But it's a question about how staff is going to draft that anticipation. What is a maker? How does it interface with mobility? And can you have a lot of humanity living, at the same time leave the language loose enough that it's not inferred or confused as perhaps just having what I would call almost a medieval quality of making canoes and candles. The other question I had was about in the neighborhood, the neighborhood transitions. It's the slide that does show the daylight plane. So many parcels in Santa Rosa are kind of small. It's telling that the catalyst parcels are slightly larger, but we have so many parcels that maybe average a half acre, 1.5. And as we climb vertically, the tender question to staff back is the 45-degree plane. I think we're going to have in the next decade or two a lot of conversations about people wanting to develop smaller properties and trying to make an economic go, and what the repercussions are certainly overshadowing is not the right idea. That I'm just looking at as a potential point of activity and discussion. So those are my two questions.
Not sure if staff has a response to those questions / comments at this time. So maybe we can head to Henry Wicks for any questions, and then we'll have staff kind of summarize an answer for you, Vice Chair Hedgepeth.
Thank you.
Board Member Wicks.
Amy, thank you very much for the fine presentation, and welcome to City of Santa Rosa. I enjoyed working with you at the County of Sonoma, and you'll be a great asset to City of Santa Rosa, I'm sure. Question is, this is a good evolution of a downtown specific plan we worked with for many years. And like any recipe, is there an avenue for, once this plan is released and it gets in the hands of the developers, it gets in the hands of the architects, and we start to see some potential fatal flaws with the actual implementation of certain portions of it, is there an avenue to make tweaks to it quickly?
Yes, I'll respond to that. So one thing I failed to mention is that the plan does include a review every 2 years to really look at the implementation, how things are going, and that will provide an opportunity to potentially make some changes. We do always anticipate having to make a few changes after adoption and after things take hold. So I think we will provide that opportunity every few years to analyze the growth that would be happening under.
Great. Specific to the unbundled parking in the downtown, I would imagine that if I were to do a deeper dive on that and get comments to you, was that done and studied in terms of anticipated numbers of housing units and retail space and the need for X number of parking garages with X number of parking spaces in it? How was the downtown unbundled parking justified?
So part of the justification is simply that it is a transit-oriented area. So we did look at what areas of the core around the transit mall and the smart station. So what areas would be within a half mile. And there is a lot of streamlining opportunity under state law for areas within that half mile. But there was additional studies done on parking specifically. So really looking at the surplus parking in the lots that are underutilized at this moment, and the surface parking lots. So I should also note that the surface lots downtown are identified in this plan as potential opportunities for development through that city or public-private partnership, and that there are a lot of underutilized parking areas within our existing garages, and those are proposed to be used as incentives to developers who are doing housing to be able to contract with the city for those parking areas. So there's a couple different components to the parking strategy, but it was based on data as far as how it's utilized now and looking at the influx of business and housing that we hope to see. But a lot of that really stems on being able to really focus the transit and that there's a greater utilization of the smart station in the transit mall and the multimodal connections within. So the more people you have living and working in one area that's transit rich, hopefully won't have the need for parking, and that people, when they come into the plan area, would be able to park in one area and navigate through the whole downtown and Railroad Square area without having to move their parked car. So that was part of the analysis as well.
specific in the plan, is this the right time to ask questions, specific questions about the plan, Chairman?
Yeah, I think this is question time, right? So
All
question
right.
away.
I was just thinking that some of these I might ask offline since we're going to have another opportunity to voice our opinions, and we're actually not taking an action tonight. But I'll go ahead and ask it in the activity in the active overlay zone. I noticed specifically in Chapter 4. There's a lot of mention about guidelines, both design guidelines and how do you say it? Just specific standards in there about retail type mixed uses on the ground floor, but very little. In fact, it only mentions residential one time, and it mentions it in a non-residential development that the streets in this overlay shall have clear untinted glazing. There's very specific things about the retail and commercial components, but not a lot of mention for us to look at design guidelines for the residential components of that. And I think maybe this is more of a comment than a question, but did you notice that, I guess, is the question. And my comment is, I think it needs to be expanded upon. We saw a project a month ago or so, and it had a residential component in a very active street environment, and there weren't a lot of design guidelines for us to use in that application of that project. I think this would be a good opportunity to add to that section on, it starts on like 4.3 and continues through 4-5 and has lots of graphics, but they're graphics oriented in a traditional mixed use retail on the ground level and not addressing any residential aspect to that.
Thank you. That's a great comment.
Great. Thank you, Board Member Wicks. Mine are kind of quasi question comments, so I'll just save them for comments and people can ponder them. So Chair Edmondson, at this time, I'd like to hand it back to you, but before doing so, Liaison Bill Rose reminded me that I believe we were going to take public comment before we got into questions. And so we've kind of been through the DRB questions. Maybe we pause before it goes back to CHB to take public comment, and then CHB can ask questions that way. If we don't have to pause during public comment to get staff response, and we can kind of take some notes and hopefully get some of those public questions answered during question time for the boards.
Thank you, Chair Kincaid. Yeah, I had sort of just mentally reordered things, but I see no reason why not to proceed with public comment now to spare any members of the public wishing to speak more time out of their evenings with their families. Things are pretty rough these days. So staff, do we have any members of the public who you know are present and wishing to speak?
We don't see any raised hands, so we can say now that anybody watching the meeting, if you are a member of the public and would like to speak, star 98.
Patty, I hate to interrupt. It could just be a problem with me, but I have difficulty making out what you're saying. There's a bit of a choppy connection.
I'll take off my mask, that should help. Any members of the public, if you can raise your hand. I'll let Mike speak.
Chair, just so you're aware, no one is raising their hands at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Maloney. If any members of the public are having difficulty raising their hand in the Zoom interface, there's a phone number on the first page of the agenda. I encourage you to call that or email Ms. Lyle, Mr. Rose, or Ms. Murray, so that we can try to afford you an opportunity later on to make your comments. But in the meantime, let's move on to CHB questions for staff. And let's proceed. Mr. DeBacher, do you have any questions for staff?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do have some questions. I also will have some comments later, but let's start with the questions. I wonder if in the development of the setback standards, specifically the setbacks in, where are they? UDCS-2, whether the state and federal guidelines were looked at in establishing that. In some of the training I had from the federal and state, when you were talking about a height difference with a preservation district, depending on the radicalness of that change, instead of being 16 to 20 feet to go to 6 stories from a residential district, it was considered to be either a single lot beyond the district or a whole block beyond the district would be the buffer. And I'm wondering, what was the state and federal looked at, or was that not?
I'm going to see if anyone else from the city team would be able to help with this one. Our consultant is not on the line tonight, but that is something that we can look into and make sure to respond to when we come back to you in September with the actual design guidelines in the code.
Thank you. That was the purpose of the question. And the other one is outside of the historic purview, but it's pertinent to kind of where I am right now. I, of course, work for the county, and I was involved in the Emergency Operations Center during the last disasters, and have already come for this coming one, where evacuation is a big deal. And I would like to hear more when we hear from you next about a high density core without private transportation in it, and how you get those people out when an evacuation is called. My gut's turning kind of a bit. Right now, even with trying to get lower density, people moved out in areas, and I'll leave the rest of that as a comment, but I am wondering if we can see more about how evacuation would occur in the higher density model proposed. I think those were the two primary questions I had.
Okay, that's a great question and relevant to the moment. And so we can provide a little more feedback on that maybe at the next meeting about some of the background that went into that. And then I'll also say that we are jumping into a general plan update and a hazard mitigation plan update. So both those documents will also be taking a deep dive to update the existing evacuation planning efforts and really look at the potential growth, not just downtown, but throughout the city.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lyle. Board Member McHugh, any questions at this time for staff?
I do, in the sense that I look at the plan and I realize all the, it's a good plan, all of the process we've gone through to develop it. But, Cherry Street, the St. Rose District, all of this has an impact on those historical districts, just in terms of the shadow that they put on the on those districts. The idea of a bungalow facing across the street, a 6-story building, there's some politics involved in that. And I know perhaps that's not where you are focusing, but very often what happens is that we get churned up in the politics as opposed to the plan. And so how do we mitigate that? How does the Cultural Heritage Board, when we're faced with those kinds of issues, deal with those issues? That's kind of where I'm coming from, because very often what happens is we get caught up in the politics.
So those are the areas that we would love feedback on. So if you feel like there's too much ambiguity in some of those transition policies, we'd love to know what more you would like to have as a decision maker, or if we need to create tougher standards, or we just need to know the best way that you would like to see this implemented.
My interest would be in knowing what my flexibility is. What can I do, and how can I be more effective as a member of the Cultural Heritage Board when I'm faced with those kinds of issues?
Yeah, I think that will be probably easier to walk through when you see the draft of the zoning standards and the design guidelines. But we do want some flexibility, but we want to be able to provide enough guidance where it's very clear to the development community what would be required, and very clear to the residents within those districts what if it reflects what they need. So we're trying to strike that balance, and would love input if you have any on what those could look like, and hopefully in September you can react to what we're drafting.
Hello, this is Claire Hartman, Deputy Director of Planning. I wanted a chance to respond to that question as well, because I know it has been a struggle and will continue to be a struggle, especially these transitory sites that are partway in our historic districts or on the edge. Even if they're outside the historic district but on the edge, they still have a relationship, and that's challenging. And so one of the things that we have interest in is working with both of these boards in our next round, and maybe address some process improvements that might help in your roles in terms of clarity and the confidence in the guidelines that you use or that you share. But definitely we recognize more work needs to be done in that area. So we don't have that for you tonight, but we hear you and we would like to help with that process.
Board Member McHugh, do you have any follow-up or further questions to staff's response?
No, thank you. No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you, Board Member McHugh. Board Member Groninga, do you have any questions for staff at this time?
Got to unmute.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
As a bit of follow-up, I guess, to John's question regarding, in essence, the way, at least I'm trying to grapple with this, is the whole nature of what appears to be a changing role for the Cultural Heritage Board. And thinking about it, and before hearing John, I just think maybe this is for the Cultural Heritage Board to consider somewhere down the line soon. And that would be taking a look, perhaps through study session or whatever. Do we need to suggest changes or expansion of our roles, either expansion or contraction? We just went through kind of a bruising experience with the conflict of trying to do, in essence, the right thing for the city as it relates to the Caritas housing project, and at the same time, either inadvertently or perhaps directly trampling on some of the principles that hold import to the Cultural Heritage Board. So I'd just like to throw that out to the Cultural Heritage Board, that we may want to initiate that sort of discussion and then work with staff to see, okay, what is it that we can do to better clarify our roles in these kind of gray areas. Then related to that, taking a look at and listening to the matter of catalyst areas and transition neighborhoods, that sounds as if the city's wanting the Cultural Heritage Board to expand its role. And maybe that's something we should do, whatever, but Or would we be, in essence, creating, without votes within a district, creating small cultural heritage district or historical districts? Another question for that. But these sorts of thoughts are, I think, rolling through mine and some other folks on Cultural Heritage Board as we grapple with these kind of citywide problems coming right into issues, I should say, coming right into the cultural heritage sphere of influence, I guess you'd say. So no more on that for now, but I think we need to talk, listen, and try and figure out where we go from here as a board. And then one other general would be on the financing. And I know Casey and myself and perhaps others have worked on various features of these area plans around the city. And my own recent experience, the Roseland whole planning process was rather important, and connected to that are a lot of priority issues that will require financing. And so one of the things I think, as we take a look at this, do we understand what the priorities are for the city? I really like what I'm seeing generally on the downtown specific plan. Don't get me wrong, but how do we do all the necessary things that we need to do? Another general question. More specific, and would be on the parking, the surplus parking, the use of surplus parking, which I think is a magnificent idea. But what happens and how does the city monitor it if we start to use up that surplus parking? Is there a point in time where we say no more? And that is so particularly specific development project orientation, if that makes sense. But in other words, could we find ourselves making a good thing of the surplus parking that we use so much of it, and then we don't have enough in the downtown, and we've got unbundled parking policies in these zones, these areas? Just that's a question, more curiosity than anything, and it probably is an issue that wouldn't be faced for a good number of years. But at some point, if we're successful with what these plans are about, it could become an issue. And an example, I don't know if there's any current plans, specific discussions going on, but at one point I was approached by a prospective developer for student housing to go downtown with no parking, and that the plan, which I thought was a good one, was to engage in a relationship with the JC, and that students that would have parking, need of car, have it parked in the parking structures there. Wouldn't impact your surplus parking, as I'm understanding this. But I think we should keep looking at those possibilities that would help the transit-oriented areas in particular. And let me see. That's enough for now. I'm tired of talking.
If I may, I'll just respond to the parking question. It's a great question, and we've really grappled with that among the staff, and our sub-consultant, Nelson Nygaard, has some expertise in parking as well. And we see the surplus parking as a finite resource. So in the plan, what we hoped we did is to create an incentive opportunity. So the surplus parking couldn't be used unless there was a certain amount of affordability or a certain number of units. So those are the things that we hope to help incentivize housing and the type of housing that we want. Because we know once that surplus parking is gone, it's gone. So there will need to be a program developed to kind of track that and monitor, and that's already being done by some extent with our parking manager and the parking department already. But there have been conversations already about using some of the surplus parking. So this plan really proposes to put in some guidelines around that and some parameters.
Thank you.
Board Member Groninga, do you want to ask staff for any further answers to any of your questions, or is that sufficient at this time? We're going to come back around for comments from everybody.
It's sufficient for now.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Groninga. I will move on to myself. Ms. Lyle, thank you very much for the presentation. It's been excellent and nice to make your acquaintance, even though we can't see you and we haven't actually met in person. I'll treat this as meeting you, so in the CHB context. So welcome aboard. All right. So I want to ask first about this provision regarding the historic resources survey and analysis. There was mention of grant funding. You know, are there any kind of strict obligations to conduct this survey? I'm wondering who could possibly enforce it. Is it just a non-binding advisory plan goal? Because as we all can readily admit, and it's very much consistent with the law, but these specific plans and general plans, the goals section, you know, it's helpful, but they're all things to all people. And I want to know, you know, if the funding falls through, which it often does through no fault of anyone, are we just going to be left sort of with no survey, with it just as some sort of long-term goal, which we've seen for citywide surveys, and with these development projects proceeding apace?
You're correct in your assessment that long-range goals need to be prioritized, and they're not all to be developed all at once or accomplished all at once. And so as we were drafting this plan downtown, there was also a grant opportunity through Senate Bill 2. And so we did apply. It was a non-competitive grant. And the purpose is really to promote housing or to remove barriers to housing production. And so this is one of 3 items that we submitted a grant application for. So because it would be non-binding, it would simply be the historic survey work for the sites within those opportunity areas that are age eligible. So it would not carry any regulatory authority, but could be used as a resource for applicants in the downtown in those specific areas.
And the EIR, draft EIR, goes through a few properties that, you know, by their evidence seem likely candidates for, you know, being designated as historic resources and being eligible for various listings. And then there's a comment that at minimum, 1,121 properties are age eligible. I don't remember if there was a distinction between the opportunity areas and the remainder of the plan area, but this resources survey doesn't include the plan area in its entirety. It just includes those zones. Is that a grant-related limitation, or is that for some sort of substantive purpose?
No, it really is related to where we want to facilitate and streamline development. And so those key opportunity zones are where we propose the most change to occur. And the other areas would be largely preserved under the proposed plan. So there would be no need to facilitate that same level of historical survey work in the areas that we don't want to particularly encourage that kind of development.
So with respect to the transition zones to the existing designated historic neighborhoods, you know, there's no sort of automatic Springer provision where, the results of these surveys come in and there's, transition areas that are implemented based on proximity to those. It really is based on the existing historic neighborhoods, and the outcome of the surveys, be that as it may, they're simply unrelated. Is that correct?
They're unrelated, but we don't know what will come out of those surveys. We do plan to include a historical context statement for the downtown areas that aren't already within a preservation district. So there could be additional work identified as a result of the survey work, but it is speculative at this time. We are moving into a general plan update. We are, and then one of the other efforts that was funded through that Senate Bill 2 is looking at missing middle housing and doing an ordinance related to that. So there are some other efforts that could spin from the survey work, but at this time, it's really just to review the historical significance within those opportunity areas.
So if the city were to establish a new historic district, there wouldn't be any sort of automatic springing, no further action type transition areas under this plan?
Correct.
Okay.
So that's why at this time, we really want help to make sure we've identified the right areas that need to utilize that transition zone policy or that set of policies.
Is there a particular reason why it wasn't written as a springing type provision? Because, if it were with reference to historic districts that were established, there wouldn't be such a necessarily an unfair surprise element, at least no worse than there is now.
Can you rephrase that question?
Yeah, sure. I just, if we're having these transition zones to defer to the development pattern of historic areas and historic districts, why not cut to the chase? If new ones are created, we're about to have a survey, it might support that determination. Why not have it be so the plan is automatically compatible with those things instead of automatically incompatible?
And this is Claire Hartman again. Yeah, I think that's a good observation and opportunity that we can look at. I think one of the goals of the plan is to be predictable and to provide more certainty to residents as well as to applicants. Also clarity to staff and how to deal with different properties. So I think your observations will take.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just think that, it's going to remain the case with everywhere else in the city, that the city has authority to create these districts. And, it's the law in place when people take their properties or to the extent that it gets changed, that the sort of sovereign power is intact. So I don't think that's unfair surprise. With the active ground floor overlay, it seems like, that was, done in deference to historic districts, but not necessarily others. Is there a reason that was not a plan area-wide design guideline or requirement?
So it really is focused on the downtown core and then the Railroad Square area for the areas where we expect that new development to occur. So there could be the potential to expand it in other areas or to create some additional language for the more neighborhood-centric areas. That could be something to do.
Yeah, because my concern is that, we are tasked with preserving the character of the historic districts, but also, I think that it's within our purview to, look at development patterns if we're in these report contexts and say, hey, this is a design style that is not going to lend itself to future historic neighborhoods and inactive ground floors. I'm not sure which historic districts would have that structure characteristically. I want to talk about the Roberts area. And this was telegraphed the last time, but it pretty much seems to me like design-wise and with respect to its interaction with Olive Park, it is the same as it came around to us last time. There's no connection or new underpass. proposed under Highway 12. There's proposals for improved connectivity for pedestrians and bicycle, and improved servicing by mass transit on Dutton, as well as through Olive Park. But there's no park. There is the highest FAR ratio down there for practically the entire plan area within the Roberts area. And there's also no auto connectivity except, or mass transit connectivity except along Dutton and through Olive Park. Could you please elaborate on the reasons why that area was within the plan but sort of left out of all of its benefits? And that might be just that the council decided that. That's usually the answer.
I'm going to see if Claire is able to respond to that. If not, it might be something that we can handle next time when our consultants are present.
Hi, this is Claire Hartman. Yeah, so the area was included in the plan because it's within walkable distance to our downtown, our station area, the smart station, the transit area. It looks far on the map, and maybe even optically, because you can't see downtown or see the smart station. But we've taken many of you on a tour, and we take people on a tour to see that it's actually quite connectable in a walkable distance. So I think that's why it was included. It's just its proximity and the opportunity in that it's within the area, but also it's underutilized. And so it's an opportunity area to include and improve, and also to connect Roseland. Otherwise it's like an abyss that is a barrier between Roseland having direct access to our downtown. So that's why it was included. But what we'd love to get feedback on is some of the elements that you mentioned. What else needs to be provided there? We actually didn't get a lot of comments on what to provide there. And so I think that's part of why it looks a little bland in terms of specific elements, where other neighborhoods that are more established already, we were able to incorporate a lot of what we received in our public engagement process. That one was really challenging. We did meet out in Roseland, but again, we had a hard time getting very specific on interest. So it's kind of a blank slate, and we're all ears on what you think it needs.
Sure, I'll try to reserve my comments until later on that. But thank you, Ms. Hartman. The parking and the unbundled, it's now permitted. Why is that not compulsory? Because if it's about flexibility for developers, that would be more flexible. And to not make it compulsory is to sort of resign ourselves to the car-centric design to a degree that would be, I guess, in excess of what developers think would be necessary to make their projects viable. And if we're talking about affordability by design, this would contribute to that important goal. So is there a reason why that was rejected?
I don't know of a specific reason, but we did talk about the potential for setting a parking maximum, so kind of doing the reverse. So there's a lot of different options that we've seen across the state and across the country, and this is where we landed. So it is good feedback if you feel like it needs to be done differently, but we want to be able to provide that flexibility as downtown transitions into a more transit-oriented area.
Yeah, just, talking about the development patterns and when these historic neighborhoods were built, I don't know this for a certainty, but I bet the parking requirements were a lot looser or perhaps non-existent. I know the Euclid revolution and stuff, so there was time to do it, but they wouldn't have probably developed this way if that had been the case. And so I think that the more we allow this car-centric development, I appreciate all the steps that were taken to reduce that, but once again, to the idea of having historic neighborhoods in the future and that kind of character. Okay, that's it. Unless there is further staff comment, maybe we could take a very tight 5 and come back for board's final comments. Chair Kincaid first, and then staff. Any thoughts on that?
I'm good with the type 5 break.
Staff, is that fine?
That'd be great.
Okay, let's take a type 5 and we'll reconvene. Thank you.
This is the recording secretary.
Hi, Patty. Unfortunately, and maybe it's just a problem with me, but your audio is super garbled. But I assume that means we're all ready to come back. Is that correct?
Hi, Chair Edmondson. This is Mike, one of those. So yeah, we're having some technical issues with audio on that computer. So yes, we are ready to start.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Mr. Maloney. I'm going to call the meeting back to order. And unless staff has any clarificatory additions, I'll turn it back over to Chair Kincaid to go through the comments of the DRB.
And thank you, Chair Edmondson. Board Member Wagle, comments on the plan.
Patrick Streeter gave us actually a fairly comprehensive overview before he left the city, I guess maybe 6 months ago, 9 months ago, something like that. And so really the only comment I had, I kind of asked it during my question, was the public restroom component. But I think you guys have done a great job. I think this is in the right direction. I think this FAR thing hopefully will encourage some development. And I really appreciate you're thinking about the transitions between neighborhoods and between density and between use typology, because without that, I don't think we're going to be, that's how you're going to figure out how to help the core develop. Is how that's the linchpin. There is the transitions between things and how that flows together. So I appreciate all that, and I really like the inclusion of the greenways. I guess my only comment on that is maybe how we can figure out to how to have a different type of development that's associated with the greenway a little bit. There's been a lot of positive news about obviously the the High Line in New York, which is considerably very different. But there's something called, I think it's called the Beltway, the Beltline, something like that, in Atlanta, which was a old train track that they turned into a greenway. That's been really a unique project with how different types of building typologies have been integrated into connecting to that greenway. So I think that'd be something to look at. But other than that, great job. Appreciate y'all's time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Board Member Wagle. Board Member Wicks, comments on the plan?
Sure, just a couple, and I too voiced some of my my comments during the question phase, so I won't repeat those. Outstanding job in developing this plan. Keep the effort rolling. I too like the use of the FAR versus height limitations. I think it's an excellent approach, and I know it is successful in other downtowns. I would like to see a little more justification for the unbundled parking. And I know you stressed that we have parking surpluses now, but if we have 1,000 surplus parking spots, I'm not suggesting that's what it is, but it sounds like a big number. It would take six projects at 1 parking spot per unit, or 12 projects at 0.5 parking spots per residential unit in the downtown to use up that surplus parking. So I'd like to see more detail about what happens when that surplus parking goes away, because it's going to go away if this plan is successful and we become a vibrant downtown with lots of residential in it, which I'd love to see. But I don't live in the downtown currently. I live on the outskirts in the city limits, but I have to get in a car and come down to the downtown to visit restaurants, visit retail, visit people in the downtown. And I want to make sure that I've got a spot to go to. And I think drawing from the suburbs outside the city limits is important to account for that ability to, preferably find a street parking spot. But like a lot of vibrant downtowns, you end up having to go to a parking spot, and a parking lot to park your vehicle. And if all that surplus parking is used up by uses in the downtown, that I think that's going to be short-sighted on our part. Won't be a problem until the surplus parking's gone, but when it's gone, what do we do? And maybe there's some sort of accountability by the people. The developers just don't rush in and use up all that surplus parking. But what accountability in the future and providing additional parking lots, the cost of that infrastructure and how that's addressed. I would like to see our board have continued review of the projects. And maybe it's not just a concept review. Maybe it's a quasi concept preliminary. I'm not sure how that would be structured, and we really didn't get into that. I actually meant to ask that as a question, but I would like to see our boards, both our board and Cultural Heritage Board, have an active role in the development of future projects. So with that, again, I'll leave it on a positive note. It's an excellent plan, and look forward to seeing it finalized and implemented for us all to use in the future.
Thank you, Board Member Wicks. Vice Chair Hedgepeth, if you have comments on the plan, and there you go. I was just going to say, if you could turn your video back on. So go ahead.
Turn your voice on too.
Yes. Well, I'm very relieved about seeing a rebirth or a restart from the downtown station area plan. I know that the word vibrant is my happy word in this whole thing. And I'm sure it's excited the consultant team. Amy, great job with this. I keep thinking about towns like Napa, where they gave all their parking to hotels. So the developers were left with their own cost for underground structures and so forth. And then I think of a town like San Jose. They're building a mega building now. It's got 8 floors of parking above and 4 below the Earth's core. And so that's a capitalized town where they can do big buildings and park all kinds of cars. And I centralized my comments by saying that it can't all be housing downtown. It has to have some business. And the word culture, cultural vibrancy, the way that people are going to be down there is that between restaurants, culture, art, music. I don't know if you proportion this like it's 14% cultural. It's kind of stupid to talk that way, but I think what's going to bring residents into the downtown is it's not boring. And obviously I'm pro-activating the ground level. My comments about maker issues were not meant in any way to look at artisans, craftsmen. It was that when you capitalize the land, when you have large amounts of infrastructure that you pay for, typically it implies you're going to build big buildings, which is how things are capitalized. I remember in the Roseland plan, I know, Claire, you're probably listening, there were different neighborhoods. They weren't necessarily historic, where it was written into the general plan that we don't want to displace affordable residents. So there's like $60,000 a door to relocate residents. And had that been not written in, potentially the idea of having more density housing, more vibrancy could be in the picture. But it's a careful comment because you don't want to slight the affordability issue. And many developers rely on subsidized funds, and they develop in well-capitalized ways, and some of them use the lost middle. So all the right words are here. Invite the lost middle, invite 100% affordable, invite 100% market. But I think my comments in general are that having enough flexibility in the plan is important. I do empathize with the Cultural Heritage Board. Where do we go? What is our districts? What is our care? And are there significant buildings, art moderne? Some of the buildings from 1951, you know, all of us as we age, we go on lists as people as well as buildings. But those are tough questions because there are star examples. And Drew, you commented very wisely about the downtown library. I really appreciate that comment. What if the downtown library turned into an art cultural place where there's cello music or rock music, but if it could transition to another use besides a library, and still be a wonderful building and a catalyst. So there's the whole idea of repurposing that could be written in. So in closing, the whole thing about the car, maybe over time, 15 years from now, there's shuttling in. There's, Henry, for your case, there are 4 places where you can come into the city, park on Steel Lane, and these loops that we talk about. Can we capitalize bus service to take people within 16 minutes to the downtown from 4 places so that we don't choke on too many cars down there? Those are my comments.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hedgepeth. And I guess it is my turn. So I won't repeat the comments already made, but I would echo them. I think there's a great plan. I think that it's very intentional in the way it is written, and it talks about actions and spurring development, and I really appreciate that. I think flexibility is very wise in 2 areas that I'd like to point out. One is the areas where there's potential for public-private partnership. That could take many forms, and I'm not sure which form is going to be the most appropriate, and they may all be different, whether the city continues in the deal structure on a 100-year land lease or contributes the property towards the deal for certain other financial considerations. But I would recommend that you leave it open as much as possible so that it's, it could be a public-private partnership, or it could be a holistic sale of the property, and do what's best for the development to succeed versus any other reasons to make a decision on how it's structured. The other one that I would recommend that there be the most flexibility on, and it has maybe more to do with CEQA documentation and not trapping ourselves, is the live-work units, the areas where you're looking at potentially these maker spaces and live-work. It just hasn't worked yet in our city. And again, this being a 20-year plan, I think it's relevant to have it in there, but I would say that, if it can be duly zoned, if it can, have both flavors in its planning and start out as something else. I think we talked about that on our other project, and maybe it transitions later when it becomes more relevant to live work. But I hate to see those kind of be built in throwaways because that's kind of what they've been thus far in our city. And then lastly, I think that, just continue to encourage being mindful on the infrastructure phasing so that, we're not building some of these things. Well, this can be built because it kind of serves its purpose right now, but we'll tackle the infrastructure for the other 4 or 5 properties when those come about. That ends up being do and redo. And I just think that the infrastructure should be kind of married with the prioritization of the areas you're shooting for development. And it sounds like those conversations are happening, but can get lost in the shuffle when the plan gets implemented. So those are my comments. I appreciate staff and its time. And with that, I will hand it over to Chair Edmondson.
Thank you very much, Chair Kincaid. Let's move to Board Member Groninga. Would you mind kicking us off with your comments?
Okay, I'll try and excuse me here. Try and be brief here. Overall, I do like the plan, and it just shows great possibility. I am particularly have wanted to see the reconnection, I guess you'd say, between downtown and Railroad Square. And if that travels through the plaza, all the better. And though at the same time, I think we need as we develop these plans, we need to get a better sense what the long-term future of the plaza is itself, because that's going to be a critical impact at some point, should it need to be repurposed in some form or manner. The other, getting back to the parking, I think I like what is being suggested in terms of the usage of the surplus parking, but I forget which board member, DRB member mentioned it, but I believe it was Mr. Wicks that showed a quick illustration of how that could vanish rather quickly. And then it then makes one think that when you're negotiating with developers, we're going to have to be real clear as to what they can and cannot do as it relates to unbundled parking, and or they have to come in and show proof they've got plans and solid plans for using some of that surplus parking, and then we can monitor it as we go along. Then again, I think we need for the Cultural Heritage Board and perhaps in some areas for the DRB too, we need to really take a look, as I indicated before, what is being asked of the Cultural Heritage Board as we work in the future, reviewing. I expect that we should be reviewing portions, if not all, of the various projects within the planning area here. But I think we need to really give that serious consideration as to what our role is, basically, and what sort of role should that Cultural Heritage Board have or perhaps not have. That's a big question, and I think it's one that we'll have to grapple with in the not too distant future as the Cultural Heritage Board. I think it's fair to say that the Cultural Heritage Board wants to be a purposeful review board and doesn't want to find itself in a position of, in essence, being a negative influence when we can be a positive influence. So with that, and then the final thing is, again, getting back to, for the city and its financing priorities. I would expect, I could be wrong, that once this plan's released, that there'll be far more interest in developing in the downtown and the Railroad Square areas before you get to an area like Roseland or perhaps some of the other projects throughout the city. And we just can't lose sight of those that we've already committed to as well. And with that, I'm done.
Thank you, Board Member Groninga. Board Member McHugh, would you like to make your comments?
I would. The first time I came to Santa Rosa was in 1964. I remember the downtown. I remember it vibrant. I remember that, the Occidental Hotel, the State Theater, the Roxy Theater, and all the activity that was going on. And then I left Santa Rosa. Next time I was back was in 1974, and all that was gone. It had all been torn up and gone. And what I'm thinking now is that what we're going to be doing now is tearing up what we have to go to something else. And what I guess was that I worry about is I remember back when when I was here and the first job I had in Santa Rosa was an administrative intern working in the city manager's office. And I remember Hugh Cotting advocating against the mall and how, and as I think back on that, I think he was absolutely right in the sense that it just transformed the downtown of Santa Rosa into something that was just not attractive or useful. And now we're about to tear that up again. And so what I'm thinking is that we need to be pretty careful. I think we need to be paying some serious attention to, historical sites, historical buildings, all of the things that are kind of in the plan, but at the same time, paying serious attention to that with what we have, and doing this in a way that makes some sense of our city. And also the other thing about what's happening now versus what happened back then is COVID-19. And I'm not sure that the planning process that we've engaged in really has taken that into consideration. When I think about what's going on in San Francisco, where rents are dropping, people are leaving the city, working at home, all of those kinds of activities, how does that impact this plan? How does it make it maybe more viable for us to be able to do some of the things we want to do downtown, because of the fact that we are probably the most the best market in terms of rents. So all of that thing needs to be taken into consideration. I'm not sure, how to do that, but I do want us to be thinking about how we're going to tear the downtown up again and make it into something that is much more viable than it is. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. And, one of the other things that the Cultural Heritage Board has been interested in for a long time is surveys and surveying where our cultural heritage sites are, and spending some cash and spending some money to kind of get a sense of that, to be more focused on what our heritage is and looking for ways to preserve that heritage. And so that's where I'm coming from.
Great, thank you, Board Member McHugh. Board Member DeBacher, would you like to make any comments?
Yes, thank you, Chair, very much. And I have some specific comments, and I'm going to limit them to brief comments rather than expand upon them. And I can do that in writing later, but I did want to bring up some comments. First of all, I like a great deal of what's in here. And I love the vision they have for our downtown. Being in government, I also have a deep appreciation for the amount of time staff has put into this and the compromises that had been made to produce this document. Very, very deeply appreciated. What else I like is I love some of the specific measures that are being portrayed in here, specifically some of the treatments on the ground level are very much in keeping with what it's going to really be an enhancement to our downtown. Third, I also love the fact that enhanced historic is one of the 6 key goals for this. On that level, I expect historic to be given the due that it is claiming by being one of those 6 pinnacles. To have buffers presented in here in the way they are shown, I think is one of the key things that shows that that isn't being taken as seriously as it needs to be. My heart also leapt when I saw that the survey was part of a fresh survey was part of it. As you've heard me advocating for that for some time. Then I fell backwards a bit when I realized it not only was targeting not on the whole town, and then not just on the station area plan, but only on the areas where they're looking to do the highest concentration of work. I'm glad for anything we can get. I'm surprised that money has already been found for it. Just because money has not been found for it to do more now, I don't think we need to stop looking for money continually in order to get something better than a 30-year-old overall survey for this town done by professionals who don't have a stake in what the outcome is and are doing the job that they're doing professionally, not trying to meet a target. I am definitely going to look closely at any things that are going to happen with process change. And I also on the survey, I appreciate Board Member Weigel's comment about some of our downtown assets that are in the mid-century that need to be given their due. So I very much appreciate your comment earlier. Let's see, I've already talked about some of the setbacks. I'm very concerned about the evacuation of people trying to get together their worldly goods and drag it down to a train station and try to get everybody on trains to get out of the downtown. One of the advantages we have in Sonoma County, we've astounded FEMA by having these large evacuations and not needing but a fraction of the evacuation facilities that other communities have had, because people have self-evacuated to friends' homes. If we take away their transportation options, we may not have that ability. We'll have to accommodate this new larger population at government expense and with facilities that can handle it. I am concerned about changes to the guidelines or process, and I would like to learn more about what specifically is intended there. I think a lot of effort went into creating the process and the guidelines that we're working under now, and they're no less valid. And forgive me, I'll go back to the survey one more time. I think that there was some expression that while doing a survey to establish significance would be something that would be a tool then to guide development. And I do want to remind folks that significance changes over time. As other resources of similar nature are lost, the significance of those remaining becomes greater. As new information about the people who live there and their contributions comes out, their contribution gets greater. And so it's not a fixed document, and it does need to be refreshed periodically to recognize that. And I believe that wraps up my comments. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Board Member DeBacher. All right. I'll move on to my comments. I echo all the compliments for staff. I'm constantly impressed by your ability to do such quality work and respond to all of our comments in such a substantive way, especially with all the demands you have to juggle. And, about 25% of the time there's a deadly natural disaster going on. So it's pretty impressive. And I agree with all the sentiment about this plan being an improvement over what we have now, particularly with circulation in most respects. I think that, it perhaps is underappreciated, maybe not, but without a good circulation network that prioritizes pedestrians and bikes and sort of low impact on others types of transportation, I don't know how possible it is to have historic development patterns. It just, we have to have development at a scale that humans can appreciate and don't drive by. Otherwise, these architectural features simply are nobody's aware of them, they're irrelevant. So I think that we do have to, take into account circulation and, the amount of time and the conditions under which people can walk, bike, or take mass transit from one place to the other. I think that's mostly been handled sensitively in this plan. I can't help but notice, not for the first time, but, there are a lot of aspects of this that I think are sort of under-inclusive or tilted in one particular direction, some of which are not exactly in the purview of the CHB. But once again, I think that hostility to, any sort of slice of our citizenry and the residents here, contributes to a city that, to the extent it has historic character, it's the history of brutality, quite frankly. I haven't had the chance, I should have asked for this earlier, but to look at how the homeless population and their, living circumstances are addressed. I mean, we are encouraging projects throughout the city, including in this station area, that are meant to provide affordable housing and transitional housing and emergency shelters. But the fact of the matter is we all know that those problems are going to persist for a long time during this plan. There's absolutely no political willingness on the part of people in government to do anything about the problem. So I think there is no excuse for treating property owners or business owners or any other stakeholders with any greater deference than our homeless population. And Board Member Weigel's comments regarding bathroom facilities, I think, are consistent with this criticism. But I see, the public safety and public services and sustainability section, talking about basically environmental design that is in part anti-homeless, explicitly, and also, new development adequately addresses public safety considerations in building design and site planning. To me, that is euphemistic for benches the homeless can't sleep on, places the homeless can't go. Let's shunt them off. Let's keep doing what we're doing. Let's minimize the political fallout of our brutality. So that is what I think about that. And this downtown community benefit district with the dedicated police officers, and there's even a reference to sufficient equipment here. It's almost like we're giving a toehold to the overfunded police department to refer to another plan for pork for them. So also very concerned with the giveaway of city land and the lack of restriction perhaps on these opportunity priority development sites that are on public property. These public-private partnerships, the public authorities tend to get completely railroaded and rolled in those kinds of negotiations. And once you give that up, you never get it back. If you want to use eminent domain, it's a political disaster and costs a fortune, and there's no other way to do it. And I think we're underparked, especially if we've got, pandemics rolling through, who knows. There's, private open space isn't a huge feature of these new land uses and development patterns. We need all the public space we can get, even when we're, it's choked with smoke. The rest of the time we can be healthier out there perhaps. And it certainly is good for quality of life, and for historic neighborhoods, they tend to have public open space. Or courtyards or some sort of area where people can convene with others, because our relationships are really what makes life worth living. The car versus public transit thing has come up a number of times. I think that the preference for cars, I understand that not all people who suffer from addiction can go cold turkey. Sometimes that's more dangerous, but that's what we have. And the more we enable this addiction, the longer it will go on and the more people will be hurt by it. And, we've got the evacuation concerns, which are completely legitimate, but, we have to also take into account, the pedestrians who get mowed down by cars constantly, the bicyclists, the same. We got to weigh these things out, not to mention the pollution, not to mention the destruction of public space. My biggest problem with the plan is the Roberts Road area. I think it's completely, I know there's limitations that are perhaps outside the city's control with regard to the infrastructure there. It's a total afterthought. It totally fails to unite that area. It totally fails to provide for a historic, a development pattern that could possibly be historic. I know there's a reference in the plan to like a right to farm type element for the existing industrial uses down there and uses that are legal non-conforming. That's all well and good, but I think, we've got these large parcels that are easier to assemble and easier to develop, and that's the reason why there are not these commitments to infrastructure improvements there, because the intent is to develop it more swiftly. And it's being developed in a way that I think is going to impact Olive Park in a very negative way. Because, as was commented many times, people use their cars to get places. And I think the connectivity between Roberts and the downtown and the station area, with respect to pedestrians and bikes, there will be improvements, but it just simply just not going to work. And people are going to drive through Olive Park, and they are going to sort of create a car river through there. And I don't think that's good for Olive Park's character. And not to mention, there's no park in that Roberts area. It's developed at the highest density despite being relatively distant from the public transit facilities in downtown. And one can't help but assume that, the lack of historic neighborhoods and districts designated down there is not only reflective of sort of the hands-off and, kick the can down the road attitude towards historic resources and historic surveys in the city, but also reflects the fact that, neighborhoods that are considered less rich and therefore less architecturally elaborate are considered less historic and therefore are entitled to less protection down the line, and it builds and builds and builds on itself. And we're going to guarantee an absence of historic neighborhoods down there if we develop in this kind of pattern. It's as simple as that. So I think that might capture all my plans. I've already spoken long enough. Let me see if there were any critical ones that I missed. I think the parking should be compulsory. It should be compulsory that that's unbundled. I don't see why it should be bundled at all. I think active ground floors should be encouraged in as many places as possible. I think they improve neighborhoods. I think there should be an automatic kick-in if we establish new historic districts that we're entitled to, projects that don't have vested rights, that they must be, they can have a development agreement, they can lock their rights in place. But if we have the authority, we're given the people's authority to be sovereign. And, I think that we have policy authority. When we pass a policy, it should be effective. And so I think that would be a way to use the creative solution that the consultants and staff have come up with in a way that is consistent over time instead of inconsistent and incomprehensible. I think the historic survey, it's probably going to get shunted to the side. I'm not really up to speed on it as much as the people involved in the application process, but we've seen how this goes, and it feels like lip service, and that's not staff's problem, not staff's blame whatsoever. But I don't see us getting anywhere with that, and I think that's indicative. It's indicated anyway by the sort of preference given to certain areas for reasons having nothing to do with historic value, just for the sake of development interests. So I think that, so long as those development interests think their interests are being adequately dealt with, they could give a shit about the historic resources. In fact, they'd prefer they not be there and designated. And that is everything. Staff, any further comments or requests for clarification or, any further comment before we move on to the next agenda item?
No, thank you so much for your comments, and we will look forward to coming back in mid-September, and we'll make sure to release the draft standards and guidelines. It'll probably be early September. We're going to try to give you all as much time as we can for you and the public to review before the meeting.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Lyle. I will say that concludes item 6.1, and we will move on. Next is board member reports. Chair Kincaid, any reports from you or the DRB?
I have none. Do any DRB board members have anything to report out? Not seeing anything. Back to you, Chair Edmondson.
Thank you very much, Chair Kincaid. CHB board members, any board member reports at this time? I don't have your images up, so I can't see raised hands or anything. Please just break in if you wish to speak. Thank you, Board Member DeBacher.
Thank you. Just very briefly, the reminders, and I had some notes here before, but a reminder to our board in comments that we have going forward that last year there was an assembly bill passed that increased the historic tax credit from 15% to 20 to 25%. And we need to bear that in mind as something we can help our applicants with as we come forward. Also, I think it would be a good idea for board members to take a look at SB 35. That's now in effect and is already affecting the city. We have several sites with cultural resources that are going to be affected, specifically the Carrillo Adobe site, which is Creekside, and the cannery structures over on the Railroad Square area that had historic requirements for those. And SB 35 basically takes that out of the city's hands and takes away, makes it strictly as a staff discretionary review. That's not the correct word, administrative review by the staff. And so we need to be aware that these are going on and actively at least try to comment on them through the means that are available to us as they won't be coming to the board. All right, that's all I've got.
Thank you, Board Member DeBacher. I appreciate you making the connection to the Carrillo Adobe and to the cannery structures, because I think that most of us agree that, without a doubt, those structures are significant. Regardless of their classification, certainly the Carrillo Adobe has extensive history that, their condition may have deteriorated, but, taking into account their historic character, unless we're legally prohibited from it, that's something we want to do. It's the core part of our mission. I think the city would have a hard time understanding why those things could be done without our input, and we could still have the mission that we're tasked with. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. That concludes board member reports. Let's move to department reports. There was an earlier comment that there are none. Is that still the case?
That is still the case. No department reports. Just want to say thank you to both chairs as well as all of the members present tonight for a very well-run meeting. We really appreciate it. And that's it. I'll turn it over also again to Susie to see if she has anything else she'd like to add in closing.
I have nothing to add other than my thanks as well.
And we, want to thank staff not only for the good work on item 6.1, as always, but for your help getting us aligned for these meetings and trying to take as little of the public's time and staff time and our own board members' time to do the people's business in the right way. So thank you very much. And with that, we will adjourn. I do not know when the next regular meetings of the DRB or the CHB are slated to take place, but please pay attention to the city's website for that, if you're a member of the public wishing to know when those are scheduled, and same with regard to any future joint meetings. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.